Over. This is Amelia Earhart checking in. I'm not sure if this transmission's getting to anyone. It's been more than 20 hours since me and Noonan have been in the air. He's a little under the weather, if you know what I'm talking about. We've been flying north and south, trying to find the island for a little bit now, and we can't find it. We're going to have to take this bird down soon. We have seen some islands. I don't think it's the islands we're looking for, but we may have to make the best of it. Noonan, put the bottle down. I just want you to know if this transmission is getting to anyone and things don't go our way, tell my husband that I love him and I'll love him forever. And also, it's been a pleasure and an honor to serve. I'm Amelia Earhart. No, I'm Jake Storielli, and this is Laughs from the Past.
So you have her as a spy. Pleasure to serve.
Well, that's the rumor about her last transmission.
Ooh, did she say that?
No.
Oh, I didn't know if you had a transcript.
That wasn't an actual recording. We should probably tell the people that.
Okay, that wasn't an actual recording. That was Jake's.
An actual recording.
That was
just me.
Jake wrote down. So, welcome back to Laughs from the Past, Season 3, Historical Mysteries, episode... I always say this, and then I never know the number, so I don't know why I corner myself into that. I think it's 9 or 8. I don't know. Last week we did Meriwether Lewis, which turned out to be not that interesting of a mystery.
Meriwether.
This one's good, Jake. I was apprehensive going into it because it's so studied. Everyone knows Amelia Earhart. There's songs written about it. You know, New Radicals. Whatever happened to Amelia Earhart, and where do the stars go? Something like that. Anyway, so I read this chapter of this book. Was Amelia Earhart a spy?
Right.
And I was thinking it was going to come out like dumb, because there's so many Amelia Earhart stories. Like recently it came out that she landed on an island and she was eaten by crabs, and everyone's like, that's true. And then everyone's like, that's not true. It's not what happened. And then there was another story. There's a picture of her. She was captured by the Japanese and hanging out on a dock, and she was taken prisoner of war. And everyone's like, oh, that's not true either. So it's been studied. There's numerous things. But I read this chapter of this book, and I'm so into it now.
Yeah, it sounds like they came out with some stuff in 2017. They were testing some new theories. It looks like, I think they did something on the History Channel. The Lost Evidence. They just need to Netflix this, and I think America's ready for it. Because you're right, the theories and the technology has gotten a lot more fun with the Amelia Earhart story.
Yeah, and I don't know. So you said you wanted something on the record that maybe you were going to tell me beforehand, and I think, what was your first thoughts when I told you we were doing Was Amelia Earhart a Spy? Oh,
well, so I thought when you said that, I assumed that she was a spy for someone else. Like I didn't think you were referencing an American spy. Like I thought you'd phrase that differently, which now I realize sounds weird, because if you said, that Amelia Earhart was an ally or something like that, that would have been a lot more bizarre. So I don't know. I assumed she was like a Russian. I thought because she disappeared and stuff, I assumed that people were like, oh, yeah, she disappeared. She became a Russian spy or something like that.
No. We'll get into this theory as I read. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. Let's just dive right into it. Do you have any gut reaction right now before knowing anything? Do you think she was a spy, or do you think she just was a woman pilot who traveled the world?
I don't know about spy. There's an odd percent of me, that's a good phrase. There's an odd percentage of me that actually believes Amelia Earhart didn't just die in a plane crash.
Okay.
Which seems like the such obvious theory.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
All right, let's go into the story here from the book.
Sure.
The ominous message from Amelia Earhart reached the Coast Guard cutter Itasca in the early morning hours of July 3rd, 1937. The cutter was cruising off the coast of Howland Island, a tiny speck in the middle of the South Pacific that was to be one of the final stops on Earhart's record-breaking round-the-world flight. But Earhart never reached Howland Island and soon lost contact with the Itasca. President Franklin Roosevelt ordered a massive naval search. It lasted 1 week and cost $4 million in that time's money. Whew. It covered approximately 25,000 miles, 250,000 miles to no avail. Earhart, her navigator Fred Noonan, and her Lockheed Electra aircraft had disappeared. Officials concluded Earhart had run out of gas and gone down somewhere in the ocean. In the years since then, however, the official story has been repeatedly challenged. One of the most persistent and intriguing of the alternative scenarios recasts Earhart and Noonan as spies for the United States. Their round-the-world adventure was merely cover, with their actual mission being to take pictures of Japanese installations in the Pacific. But the Japanese forced them down, in some versions, took them prisoner, in other versions, and executed them. The Earhart as a spy story originated in 1943 in the film Flight of Freedom, starring Rosalind Russell as a famous aviator named Tony Carter and Fred McMurray as the navigator she falls in love with. They planned to get lost over the Pacific to give the Navy a pretext for searching the area and checking out Japanese fortifications. Just before taking off on the last leg of the journey, Carter learns that the Japanese are on to her and that they plan to take her prisoner. So she takes off alone and ditches the plane in the ocean, sacrificing her life so the search can go on. The movie was pure fiction, but it captured the imagination of the public and of generations of journalists, historians, and aviation buffs, some of whom set out to prove it was more than fiction. So where are you at right now?
Well, I mean, this is hitting a few things for me, Jim. Because one thing you know I love are just isolated islands. Like there's just these floating islands in the middle of the Pacific. I'm looking at Howland Island right now, and I mean it's nothing. Like the fact they plan to land there is shocking. They like built a runway for her, which shows just like how different. Have you seen Howland Island? Like a picture of it yet?
Yeah, and it plays a part in this theory. So we're gonna get to it.
Like it's unbelievable that this was part of the game plan. And I'm just like just blown away by the island itself. I don't know, man. For me, it's almost tough to just get my head wrapped around like this actual game plan. Like, all right, we're flying around the world. You know, the toughest leg is the Pacific. Let's just park this bad boy on the island, and you know we'll keep it moving. Like the fact that any of this was dreamt up blows my mind. From there, I just don't know. I guess what's giving me hope on my like, Amelia Earhart landed somewhere and something happened. Is like if they were planning on landing it there, she could have landed the plane on another island. Like they made a fake runway, but she could have landed this bird anywhere.
So you're leaning into the island, and the runway that they built on the island is weird.
It's bizarre. I brought it up because, and again, I got all excited with my fascination of islands, and I saw there was some Google reviews, and someone wrote a review that was like great nightlife, and I was like, God damn it, this is what makes me jealous about these islands. Like I want to go there and know what a night out on Howland Island is like. And then I looked at the picture and realized that the review was a satire. It was a fake review. There's nothing on the island.
Yeah.
So I kind of got for a second. But
the island is a football field of asphalt.
Yes.
Right?
I mean, not even. It's so small. It looks like they made a little runway, but even that is just, it's a ridiculous scene.
Okay, you know what the island is? And this is, I'm looking at a picture now, and on the website, I'll make this the main picture, I think. The picture of Howland Island that I'm looking at right now is, it is a horse track.
Yeah.
And that's all. There's no stands for spectators to sit. There's no barracks. It's just the trail that the horses run around is the outside of the island, and that's all there is. Then there's the infield.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where she was supposed to land. All right, let's get more into the story. We'll get into this as we go. Among the leading proponents of the Earhart as a spy story was CBS reporter Fred Goerner. Goerner. In 1960, Fred G. I'm going to call him Freddie G. because I don't know how to pronounce the last name. 1960, Freddie G. came across a newspaper article about Josephine Blanco Akiyama, who said that while she was a girl on Saipan Island, she'd witnessed a plane crash in the harbor, after which a white woman and man were taken into Japanese custody. Soon after, Akiyama recalled she had heard shots fired. Eyewitness News, Jake.
Right.
Freddie G. spent 6 years investigating the matter, interviewing hundreds of islanders who claimed to have seen Earhart and Noonan. He concluded that the two landed somewhere in the Marshall Islands, were picked up by a Japanese fishing boat, and were then taken to Japanese Pacific military headquarters on Saipan. Some of Freddie G's evidence didn't stand up on closer investigation. The remains in an unmarked grave turned out to be of non-Caucasian origins, and parts of a twin-engine airplane he recovered turned out to be made in Japan. Equally problematic were that the Islanders' stories about the flyers often contradicted each other. Some claimed to have seen just a woman, others a man and a woman. Some saw the plane wrecked, others virtually undamaged. Some saw the flyers summarily executed, others in jail, and the crash itself was apparently witnessed on a whole range of islands. I don't know how evidence works. They say that firsthand evidence is always untrustworthy, but them saying like, well, some people saw just a woman and some people saw a woman and a man, like, well, couldn't they have separated at times?
Sure.
Right. But they do say they found dead bodies that weren't Caucasian and another plane. So it's like just another plane crashed there and people died. But because it wasn't Amelia and Noonan, they're like, well, fuck that. Who cares?
Yeah. Don't care. Boring.
People are probably looking for these two, though. No.
No.
Don't care about those two.
Over it.
Still, so many Islanders claim to have seen Earhart and Noonan that their stories couldn't be dismissed out of hand. It is certainly possible, though by no means proven, that two white flyers were captured by the Japanese sometime before the war. But were these two Earhart and Noonan? And were they on a spy mission? Dun, dun, dun. This starts getting so interesting for me. I'm excited. I have a highlighted part coming up here, so let's get into that. To answer these questions, investigators turned from the Pacific to Washington, D.C. One of these, Randall Brink, spent 13 years analyzing documents obtained through the Freedom of Information Act. His conclusion was similar to Freddie G's. Earhart was a spy. In Brink's account, Earhart's trip started as a publicity stunt, but evolved into a spy mission. As a personal friend of the Roosevelts, Earhart did not hesitate to approach the president for help in arranging for refueling stops during her trip, and the president couldn't risk the temptation to use the trip for military intelligence. See what's happening here?
Kinda.
To begin with, Brink pointed out, there wasn't even an airstrip on Howland Island until Roosevelt ordered the Coast Guard to build one for Earhart. This was a major construction job at taxpayers' expense, and it would be hard to justify it as nothing more than a favor for a friend.
That is a really interesting dynamic that I hadn't thought of yet. Because you're right. I mean, I kind of said I was mentioning about the time period and trying to appreciate like how big of a celebrity Amelia Earhart, like flying times a female times just where the world was at. She's an all-timer. And then, but yeah, to get that kind of government funding is a little bizarre.
Mm-hmm. Now, I think the other side of this argument would be, well, it's a record, like first person to circumnavigate the globe. It's like we spent millions to send someone to the moon just to beat the Russians. So, like, it'd be an American achievement they're investing in.
That's true.
But it's still weird to me. It still raises my eyebrows like,
Yeah, and again, that's where it's tough for me to put myself in that time period. Like, was it important enough to do this that at the time everyone was like, yeah, do it. And, like, maybe it was, because you're right, with the race to the moon and all that stuff, like, could easily see that as well.
All right. Brink interviewed a Lockheed technician who told him he'd cut holes in the plane so that special cameras could be installed to take pictures of Japanese installations. Brink also argued that Earhart's last-minute change in flight direction from westward to eastward could only be explained if hers was a spying mission. According to original itinerary, Earhart would have flown westward over the Pacific and landed in Lae, New Guinea. There she would have been surrounded by civilians in foreign territory, and any number of things could have gone wrong, including the discovery of the bulky camera equipment. But by going from west to east, she would land on the isolated, U.S.-controlled Howland Island immediately after photographing Japanese installations. On Howland, the film could easily be handed over to the U.S. agents before she flew on to meet the crowds in Hawaii, her next stop. Earhart's explanation that she was changing the flight direction because of seasonal change in wind patterns made no sense, Brink said. By flying from west to east, she was bucking the prevailing wind. Google up, Jake, Amelia Earhart flight path.
Yeah.
Because it is interesting. Do you have it?
Well, I was looking at it before.
It's because I had no idea, like, Amelia Earhart travels the globe.
Right.
I had no idea, like, what that actually meant.
Yeah.
So I found it super interesting when I found the map of, like, where she went. So I'm going to read these stops for our listeners because I think, if they haven't done research on this, they'll find it interesting themselves. She started in California. Then she went down to, like, San Diego. Then it looks like Mexico, New Mexico, over to Louisiana, Florida, Dominican Republic, then down to Venezuela, then down to, like, Brazil, parts of Brazil. Then she crosses from Brazil to Africa. She crosses over Africa, makes like 5 stops there, all the way middle of northern Africa to Ethiopia, where then she jumps over Saudi Arabia, lands in, looks like Pakistan. Then she's in the Asias now, Thailand, down to, Indonesia, a little bit of Australia, Papua New Guinea, and then she's about to come back and cross the Pacific and land in Hawaii and then back to San Diego or wherever. I didn't realize it was like that many stops.
Yeah, I mean, the Pacific is the MFer, and I read some things about that where it was like they were telling her, and everyone was like, yo, you should start there. That's the hard one. You go to Hawaii, you pit stop at that island, and then you go to Australia, and the rest is kind of on cruise control. That South America to Africa flight looks a little tough, but nothing close to what the Pacific is. And that's where, you can use a lot of logic in this. Like, Amelia's first-hand man, we've mentioned him a couple times, but he was a booze bag. And, like, again, this is 1930s. Like, he was just known. This guy knew his stuff. He could tell a good sight line when he saw it. And so, you start doing that. But her final flight, her last transmission she made, was after 20 hours in the air.
Yeah. Crazy.
That's, like, so miserable.
I've done 20 hours in a car before.
Right, but, like, you had a radio and stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot different than the loud-ass plane. And
yeah, I was listening to the prop. I was listening to the prop plane for 15 minutes while I was doing that little intro, and it was driving me nuts.
It's also like it was a physical activity flying back then. It wasn't.
Right.
So it is very impressive. Has anyone done this since? Like, when did the first person to circumnavigate? Like, this was the first attempt. Did it like she disappeared and did someone do it like the next year?
First person to fly around the world. Let's see. Wiley Post, old sandbagger. Having flown around the world in 7 days, 18 hours, he was the first aviator to accomplish the feat. Post, instantly recognizable by the patch he wore over one eye, began the journey July 15th, flying nonstop to Berlin.
Whoa, Wiley Post. So no one knows his name because he did it successfully. Everyone knows Amelia Earhart's name because she failed.
Yeah.
That's kind of shitty for Wiley Post. Like, how I should have known Wiley Post's name. He's got an eye patch on and he flew around the world.
It's true. It's odd. Why don't we care about him?
Is he American?
I believe so.
He doesn't really look American. He was American.
New York, yeah.
Texas dude.
So yeah, it looks they did like a flight around the world thing with 8 U.S. Army pilots in 1924. So that was the first like flex, and then it became the first to do it. And yeah, it looks like Wiley Post. You never hear about him.
He died early too. He died at 36.
Tough life being a spy.
On takeoff, the engine failed at low altitude and the aircraft, uncontrollably nose heavy at low speed, plunged into the lagoon, shearing off the right wing and ended up inverted in the shallow part. Both men died instantly. So he died at 36, but he did do the globe stuff first.
Nice.
All right, back to the story. In addition, Brink uncovered evidence in the files of naval intelligence that prior to her flight, the Navy had secretly installed powerful engines in Earhart's plane that would enable it to take a different, longer flight path than had been announced. This path, Brink concluded, would take her over the Japanese-controlled Marshall and Caroline Islands. So she got a better engine. All this stuff could be chalked up to like, well, we had American flying in foreign territory, so we wanted her to land in safer places and have safer equipment.
Right.
So, like, one side, oh, well, this was to help her spy. And the other side is like, well, no, we were just helping out, like, she was the most famous American doing a famous feat, so we wanted to help her.
Here's the spy thing, though. Like, if she was a spy, what was she doing?
Taking pictures of Japanese installations.
I mean, that's it?
That's it.
I mean, that's a pretty lame spy gig.
I think most spy gigs are lame.
Really? Okay. But I mean, okay. So this was a long con, fly around the world just to get to these Japanese islands and spy? Like she went, you mentioned all the places she went on her trip.
Dude, intelligence is everything. Like this was right around when Japan was starting to like take over the world. If you know where they have their docks and how many ships they're keeping there and what they have
right,
planes
but why
there.
not make that? Why not make that the more important leg of the trip?
What do you mean?
This was the end of the trip. It was the final flight. Like she went around the world the other way, and all for the spy mission to get some pictures on last day.
Because if she went the other way, this is part of this thing. If she went the other way, she wouldn't be able to land in that tiny island. She would have landed in a populated area, and they could have seen the cameras and the film. So by going the other way, it allows the fuel, whatever they marked off the fuel and the time in the air, they wanted it to land at the Howland Island with the U.S. agents right there.
Yeah, not really into it.
It's not adding up?
Too many ridiculous factors there. Not into it.
I think I'm into that. I think it makes a lot of sense. Why else would she have changed the course of the flight last minute?
Because she was exhausted. She screwed up and flew the other way around the world when she should have got the big part of the flight out of the way first.
No. Dude, before she took off the very first flight, she's in California. The first plan was to fly to Hawaii.
Right. She was going to do the hard leg first.
Yes, but then they changed the whole path and set up, because the U.S. had to make sure everywhere that she landed was going to be safe and had a landing point. They had to calculate the fuel and the time in the air, so they knew where the landing points were. So then they look, oh shit, well, it looks like the only landing point, if you fly to Hawaii first, is, and you to take pictures of Japan, is you land in wherever they said it was. And that's no good. They land in New Guinea. Like, we don't want that. So, but if we go the other way, you take off from New Guinea, then you can land at this little Howland Island.
Yeah, I mean, they said they did it for weather, and she tried doing the California to Hawaii once again before that, and her plane crashed. So I think it was like a bad luck, we got to change things up thing. I'm calling no on that.
The crash is good. The weather is what this guy's saying that doesn't make sense, because it's actually better weather the other way than this way. But either way, they changed the plans last minute, so that's something. Finally, Brink found that Earhart was heard by radio operators 4 days after she supposedly disappeared and died. Some of these reports may have been unreliable, but as with the testimony of the islanders gathered by Freddie G., there were so many to dismiss them out of hand. Brink believed that Roosevelt was well aware of the evidence that Earhart had survived and that he ordered it covered up so her spying activities, too, would be buried. Brink's detractors argued that his evidence was circumstantial and that it had overstated his case. For example, Brink cited a document in which FDR's Treasury Secretary, Henry Morgenthau Jr., stated that if the full story of Earhart's last flight were made public, her reputation would be ruined. Brink read that as evidence that the administration wanted to cover up Earhart's spying, but Tom Crouch of National Air and Space Museum, however, pointed out that it could just be simply that she made errors and was her demise was due to being a bad pilot, and that's why it would ruin her reputation. That makes sense. Some of Brink's speculation was indeed a bit off the wall. He gave serious consideration, for example, to a long-standing but completely unsubstantiated theory that after being captured by the Japanese, Earhart had become Tokyo Rose, the infamous wartime disc jockey who beguiled American troops in the Pacific. At one point, Earhart's husband had made a special trip to the front lines to listen to a Tokyo Rose broadcast and had said he would stake his life that it was not his wife's voice. How crazy is that he took it that far?
That's a rush, man. Not a lot of people feel that emotion. I'm really into that.
The fact that he was like, I guarantee this isn't my wife's voice, I'll go listen myself, means he was like 1% like, fuck, it might be your voice.
Exactly. Like he was like, I know it's not. Like I'm internally really sad. You know, I understand why this is a story and a thing. But you're absolutely right. That's what I'm saying. I'm all about the feel and the emotion, and almost zero people in the world have felt the emotion of your wife disappearing and then going to see if she's now a famous DJ.
Named Tokyo Rose.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. So while Brink was searching through files in Washington, other researchers continued to scour the Pacific for evidence of Earhart's landing. The best funded of them was Richard Gillespie, executive director of the International Group of Historic Aircraft Recovery, named Tigar. Gillespie led expeditions to the uninhabited island known as Nikamororo. That's fun. Nikamororo.
Gardner Island, now known as Nikamororo.
Yeah. It was there that, during the initial search for Earhart, a Navy pilot had reported signs of recent habitation. But after repeated circling and zooming failed to elicit any answering wave, the pilot concluded that no one was there.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. They said they said a skull and other bones were discovered, originally judged to be the remains of a stocky middle-aged man. Some experts believe the bones might have been Earhart. And it's like, okay, like I don't want to be rude here, but if you're in this deep that you're going in to find out the Amelia Earhart story, I'd like to think your bone experts would be better than it's a toss-up. These are either hers or a stocky middle-aged man's.
How could you tell?
You got bone doctors. I mean, they got to know this stuff, right?
I don't know. 1930s? I don't know. I've seen bones. I can't tell you what they mean.
That's what I'm saying, but I'd like to think someone that has studied this their whole life, they'd have a better grasp on it than me.
Well, Gillespie thought the pilot missed something, and what he found there convinced him he was right. He returned with a number of objects, among them part of a woman's shoe, size 9, consistent with the style Earhart wore, also a mid-30s cigarette lighter, which might have belonged to Noonan, who was a smoker, and an aluminum navigator's bookcase with screw holes that suggested it might have been installed on the airplane. I mean, I feel like whatever shoe Earhart was wearing in the 30s was probably worn by a ton of people.
Yeah, man, that's one of those internet things that really blows my mind lately. Have you seen the new trend where it's like, the first one that was popular was like, yo, you grew up in the 90s if you ever had a late night that ended up around one of these tables. And it's like the same patio table that was just like at every house party. Like if it was late night and you were having beers or if someone was like smoking. I want to see.
Is it like that glass table with the white exterior?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I saw another one of those recently. It's like just this white like baking pan that my mother had, and it had like 300,000 likes, and it's like you grew up with this in your house, and I was like, how did that happen? Like times were just different. So you're right. I'm not fully buying into the shoe theory, but to get them to still those islands is probably unique at the time.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's something else that I found interesting here. What if we put aside the relics of Earhart's trip and look instead at Earhart's behavior herself? What clues might be found in her past behavior? Was she the type of person likely to be a spy? Certainly, no one could doubt she had sufficient courage to be a spy. This was, after all, the first woman to fly across the Atlantic as a passenger, the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic, the first woman who broke her own transcontinental speed record, the first person to fly solo from Honolulu to the mainland, and her relationship with the Roosevelts was sufficiently close that they might very well have felt comfortable discussing top-secret matters with her. But Earhart was an ardent pacifist, likely to have resisted anything to do with the military. Besides, there were plenty of other motivations for her trip besides spying. Money, for one. Earhart's husband, the publisher George Putnam, was a master publicist with visions of lucrative endorsement contracts for his wife. Indeed, the trip generated more attention than he could have dreamed. Alas, without Earhart, there was no way for Putnam to cash in. Sucks. Nor need we be so cynical to explain why Earhart took off. This was a woman who believed flying and a flight around the world was the ultimate aerial adventure. In her journal of the flight, which she cabled to Putnam from various stops along the way so that it would be ready for publication right after the trip was over, Earhart recounted her reasons for the trip. Here was shining adventure, beckoning with new experiences. Then, too, there was my belief that now and then women should do for themselves what men have already done, and occasionally what men have not done, perhaps encouraging other women toward greater independence of thought and action. So feminism, too, propelled Earhart. Hi, Grandma. Hi. I'm recording, and then we'll leave in a couple minutes. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's ask my grandma real quick her thoughts. Grandma, what do you think happened to Amelia Earhart?
I haven't got the slightest idea.
Do you think she was a spy taking pictures of Japanese installations in the Pacific?
No.
Do you think that Franklin Delano Roosevelt was a nice president?
Yes.
What about his wife, Eleanor?
She was a wonderful woman, but very ugly.
Okay.
Wow.
Not a spy. Eleanor was wonderful, but ugly.
A hot take from someone who was there.
Yeah, she lived it.
Yeah.
Okay. That basically ends this book, Jake.
Right.
So my biggest thing...
When did that book come out, may I ask?
Before the crab stuff.
Okay.
Recent enough, but before the crab stuff, I believe.
Because that's what I dug into this a little bit, which I normally try not to do, but I wanted to do it as a way to build up the intro and I don't know, just get some pieces on. Again, if I didn't do that, I would have thought Amelia was a Russian spy. So there's that. But yeah, I'm really into this Jaluit Island or whatever it is.
What? Explain that to me then.
That's so this is the picture that came out that they said a spy had taken a picture, and it looks like her and Noonan.
Oh, sitting on the dock of a...
Yeah, standing on the dock there. And in addition, there's a ship that's seen towing an object that lines up with the boat. I don't know, man. And then there's something that says in 2015, pieces of aluminum of the same grade of the planes in the 30s was found on Mealy Atoll, which I don't know if that's a town or whatever that is. But like I don't know, man. It kind of adds up that they landed this bird somewhere and then something happened. Did they get executed for being spies? Were they kidnapped? Did they start another life somewhere else? I don't know.
I really like the picture that you're talking about where it looks like they're on the dock.
Right.
And she's sitting down and there's a plane being towed. That one really intrigues me. I have no idea if it's anything.
Right.
Because any person can look like the way she looks, supposedly, in that. But it does look like her.
Yeah. And yeah, they said they did facial recognition stuff, blah, blah, blah. I mean, here's my thing. Okay, so option A, plane crash, they die, right?
Yes.
Option B, plane crashes, they're either found by Japanese islanders or someone else, dead. Just killed because they're, who are you, how are you here, you're dead.
It's like the episode we did on the Kennedy... Was it Kennedy? Kid who went to the New Guinea.
Yeah,
went to New Guinea.
You either have the Japanese who are rising power and they could even think they're spies, or they could not and just be freaked out, or just island people that are weirded out. I mean, the spy thing isn't adding up to me.
Well, let me ask you this way.
Okay.
Would Franklin Delano Roosevelt be a bad president if he didn't ask her to take pictures of these installations as she was flying over them? Because my answer is yes. And he was a good president. And good presidents see opportunities and use them to advantage, not in a mean way, but just like, okay, how does this help the country and the nation? And she could have been doing this as a publicity stunt, but for him to say, let me install some photos. All you have to do is fly over them. Noonan's going to hit the button a couple times. When you land at the runway we build for you, we're going to get those photos. It's so easy, Amelia.
This is the part that you and I aren't aligned on, though, because she could have still started that way and still used that runway.
No, but she couldn't have, because it doesn't map up. It wouldn't have made sense. People would have been like, why are you stopping there? That's so early to stop twice in the Pacific.
They could have made up anything. They could have just said they wanted to refuel there, or they wanted to recalibrate there. They could have done anything, and she wanted to go that way initially. Yeah. So, like, I'm not jiving with that theory at all.
Well, because if she went
to send her all the way around the world to be the long con of get those final islands in there, that doesn't make sense to me.
Because if she went the other way, she would have Howland Island would have been before Japan. And then there was no isolated islands after flying over Japan. There's no tiny little isolated islands that would make more sense. Like New Guinea's right there, and they could have a parade for her, but she's gonna land on like a coastal island. It wouldn't make any sense at all.
I mean, if they really want to do that, and that was a key part of this objective, there's a lot of ways around that.
How? Well, so the thing.
I mean, you just said it that they made sure everywhere she landed was safe with American people.
No, not with American people, just with runways, and like she could land there. But most of the places she landed, if it was a populated area, it was like a tour. It was like everyone goes and sees the plane and all that. So if she went the other way from California across the Pacific, the only places she would have landed after flying over Japan would have been populated with people because they wanted to see this event. So by flipping the script, after she flies over Japan, okay, now we can land in an isolated island because no one lives in the middle of the Pacific on these islands.
Right, and here's the camera, here's a bunch of pictures. I don't get it, man. It doesn't add up to me.
I don't know how that doesn't add up. It makes so much sense.
It makes zero sense to me. It's lazy. There's so many other ways around it. If it's just an exchanging of photos,
dude, cameras were huge back then, and if anyone even like sees like they have a camera on that plane, you're out.
Right. So how did they attach the camera?
I'm sure that they had it in there, and then as soon as they landed on the separate island, the plan was to get it out of there.
So how do you have them taking pictures? You've got the guy taking photos?
No, it's an instilled camera on the back of the plane with holes cut out, is what the engineer said.
So when would they have installed it?
So they probably installed it or they installed like the rig beforehand, and then maybe they put it on right before she took off to go over the Japan just for that flight. So then when she lands in Howland, it's off, so it's on there for the least amount of time possible.
I mean, it's just it's too many moving parts for a 1930s. So for someone in the 1930s trying to fly a plane around the world that's never been done. It just seems like a lot of moving parts.
Think about the moving parts we've done on this show before. The Ghost Army? That's the same time period, same presidents.
Yeah, but that even like made a ton of sense. Like, we don't have an army, let's pretend we do. Like, I've just got, if Amelia Earhart's a spy, it would have to be something to do with her traveling to all the locations, and like you said, she's meeting, when she comes to town, it's, the Amelia Earhart who's flying around the world, and maybe she's getting a scouting report on world leaders, or just
you have spying as like, you have her being a spy. Like, you're hung up on that instead of, they just used her trip to take pictures of installations, which would have got her killed if they found out she was doing that. They couldn't have just sent a pilot to do it because they'd shoot it down from the sky. But this was a publicized event that Japan knew about it, so it had to have this friendly allure to take advantage of that and take pictures of installations and stuff that's going to help you in the upcoming war. It'd be foolish to not take the pictures.
Yeah, I'm not there at all. At all.
In what sense? I don't understand, because for me
so they just carried this massive camera with them the whole time, didn't install it to the end, or someone secretly gave them a camera for the last leg of this flight, which no one in the world has ever done before, just to snap off a few pics. I think there's just a different way to go about it. If that was the main intention of this, you go about it a totally different way.
How?
Dude, I think you're overthinking or underthinking the camera aspect of it. I think they could have made up any excuse to land at any other island or any other place. It's the U.S. It's Amelia Earhart. It's the whole story like you're talking about. She could have done that western leg, and before she gets to Papua New Guinea or Australia, they meet up with her and they deal with it on their own. And they could say anything. They could make up any excuse like, oh, yeah, the left phalange was a little messed up, so we met up with Amelia, and now she's back on the road. Like, they could have done anything. If it was the main intention, they would have gone with that.
Yeah, I think it would have been foolish to not take pictures if you're flying over if you're having a friendly flight over Japan and you're flying over there anyway. And that intelligence is huge, got to take pictures. I'd be upset if
they never went over like Japan, right?
They did. That's what the article says. And it's not Japan. It's where Japan has bases and installations set up.
I get that Japan had the territory over there, but she was nowhere close to Japan.
Well, that flight path is part of the theory, saying that she actually had way more fuel that she could have like diverted over to more towards Japan a little bit and then flew back. Like, they're saying that one of those trips, there was more fuel and a better engine, and the time doesn't match up. Like, she would have done it quicker and easier than she actually did, so they went off course a little bit and took some pictures and came back. And that's why they needed to get rid of them right away.
I think for people never having circumvented the world before, that's not just off path. I mean, that's...
Well, it's not Japan. It's the Caroline Islands. Like, she's not going over Japan. That's death.
Right. But I mean, even if she is getting some of that, like, there's... No, I'm not in on it. I'm happy that you are, but no.
Yeah, I think it makes so much sense. Like, I think it'd be silly if they didn't have her take pictures.
No. If she was a spy, it would be something else with just international relations and the fact that, I don't know, it'd seem at the time more innocent that a female was doing it and that she was clearly, trying to get around the world. And I mean,
I don't have her. I don't think
maybe some foreign relation stuff, but just slapping on a camera before that final takeoff. No.
Yeah, it's like Behind Enemy Lines. That's what that whole movie's about.
No, it's Amelia Earhart and her drunk assistant crashed a plane. That's what it is.
Oh, I do think they crashed. Like, I don't think they got taken down. But I'm just saying, if she wasn't taking pictures of these Japanese installations, Franklin Delano Roosevelt fucked up.
Okay. Well, if you're right, they had a bad plan. They should have went about it another way.
Should have landed.
Trying to get those pictures while achieving something that's never been accomplished before, that's dumb.
No, it's a great cover. What they did, Howland Island was way too small. It's like landing on a football field in the middle of the ocean.
Right.
They should have found a bigger island or or done the other way and just snuck them off. But if she better have been taking pictures.
I don't think so.
Spending all that money on the trip, like the president doing all those favors just for it, makes no sense to me.
I think it's a time period piece. I think you're going to the moon as a perfect example.
Yeah, but they were trying to actually like learn stuff there. Nothing to be learned here, unless you want to know what Japan's up to.
It was the race. It was a race for nukes. It was a race to get to the moon. It was a race to get around the world.
I don't think there's any competitors for Amelia, besides the other American, Wiley Post.
Yeah, don't say that to Wiley Post.
Grandma, do you know who Wiley Post is? Grandma doesn't even know him. He flew around the world after Amelia. Didn't. Did you look up to Amelia Earhart? Wasn't that famous. Grandma didn't know anything about her. Nothing.
Does Grandma think she's a spy?
Do you think that she took pictures of Japanese installations? She could have. Why not?
She could have.
They were.
So
she said
your grandma.
She said no. She didn't know how to fly. They were sneaky, the Japanese then, right? Yeah, that's what she said. Well, there we go. Jake and I are split. Let us know what you guys think. I don't think Amelia was a spy. I think the plan was for her to take pictures of Japan.
I mean, I don't know. I'll say this. In the Little President document or Area 51 stuff or whenever you find out all the truths, I think there's more truth to the Amelia Earhart story. I don't think it has to do with being a spy.
All right. That's it. That was this episode of Laughs from the Past. Thanks for listening. We'll see you tomorrow. No, next week.